Hello everyone, this is Dr. Crumbly, EDLE 7400, and we have got a few slides here that support the reading that you've been doing during Module 1, and this is around a guaranteed and viable curriculum, PLCs, and PLC Lite. All right, so the key learning here. As leaders, we must understand that student achievement differs significantly more within the school than between schools because of the variability in teacher effectiveness. In other words, we need to realize that we've got more student achievement differences inside of the same school if we have teachers that are teaching the same concepts and the same content but aren't teaching it inside of a PLC, but maybe just doing it in isolation, and this can cause basically a phenomenon called the luck of the draw, which is there might be 5 teachers that teach Algebra 1, but I got lucky and I got this teacher. Well, you got unlucky and got that teacher. And what PLCs really strive to do is eliminate that luck of the draw concept so that we can all work together and have 5 teachers that come together and do collaborative planning and collaborative professional development, and thusly support a culture of collective teacher efficacy so that we can improve the achievement of all students inside of the same school. There are 4 tenets that I'll just quickly go over here for PLCs. So when educators are working in a school that is truly a PLC, they recognize, number 1, they need to work together in collaborative teams rather than in isolation and take responsibility for student learning. Number 2, they need to establish a GVC, guaranteed and viable curriculum, that specifies the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that students are expected to acquire unit by unit. Number 3, they need to use an assessment process that includes frequent team-developed CFAs, otherwise known as common formative assessments, based on the guaranteed and viable curriculum. Number 4, using the results of common formative assessments to 1, identify students who need additional time and to support for learning. And then in doing those 4 things, we can then further identify students who would benefit from enrichment, extended learning. We can figure out which students in fact need additional help in order to master a standard. And then we identify and address areas of individual strengths or weaknesses in teaching based on the evidence of the student learning. So that's a key point, is that based on how the students are performing, based on the instruction they're receiving, we can see if there's places where teachers can tweak their instruction and sort of strengthen it so that it is positive and effective. And then lastly, we can identify and address areas where none of the team members were able to bring students to the desired level of proficiency. And again, taking complete ownership for that is when we know that educators are truly working in a PLC. So here we see examples of PLC Lite. This corresponds to the article that you read in Module 1 and is also, again, connected to the Module 1 quiz. But here are the examples of a PLC Lite. So this is when we say, oh yeah, my PLC is going to meet and do this, this, and this. And oh yeah, we're in a PLC. And sometimes leaders and principals of buildings say, oh, we've got a PLC for every subject area. Well, so if you're just doing a book study, having staff meetings, maybe doing operational discussions like field trip planning or behavior management, or talking about ordering supplies, these kinds of things, sharing worksheets, professional development things that are sort of disconnected from formative data, meaning like, you know, the entire PLC is going to go and attend a professional development, maybe pertaining to the content of what they teach. So I'm thinking again, let's say it's a biology class and they go and they take a best practices in laboratory instruction course. That's great, but if it's not connected to the formative data of the students that are in the class, it may not be the best professional development to reach the kids and help improve their overall outcomes. And then lastly, of course, leadership meetings. And this is what we end up doing most of the time, don't we? I mean, a PLC meeting boils down to this is admin comes into the PLC. They may talk about data, and there may be some work there that's looking at student samples, but for the most part, it becomes more of like another word for a meeting, and that's really not exactly what we want to have, right? We want to have the PLC be the place where we establish the guaranteed and viable curriculum, and then we examine student work, and we're able to really work through different strategies to help each other improve student outcomes, so that we don't have the luck of the draw where, inside of one school we have 5 teachers teaching one subject, but they all teach it a different way, some better and some worse. All right, so here in the PLC, and here when we're talking about PLCs, and GVCs, we ask ourselves, how do teachers decide what is essential? So this is this notion of prioritization instead of just getting rid of things. And so there's 3 big concepts there. The first concept is leveraging. So we want to be able to leverage, and this is by setting a standard that represents learning that applies to concepts within the content area and other subjects. So, for example, we talk about picking out priority standards, power standards. Different districts call them different things, but it's whatever that standard is that's going to apply across multiple content areas. And that leads us to bullet number 2, is thusly enduring. So the endurance factor, does the standard go beyond learning in one grade level or course and apply to life? And then lastly, readiness, the standard that must be mastered in order for students to progress to the next level. So you can kind of see that there's a pattern here. We want to find the essential standards, leverage those essential standards with their concepts across content areas, provide for endurance so that the standard goes beyond just that grade level and kids can build their learning year after year after year. And then by the time they're finished, they'll have achieved some readiness, and they're able to take what they've mastered and then use that as prior knowledge to build and progress to the next level. All right, so these are 10 ways to recognize when your school lacks a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And by the way, let's just click right back up here and remember, again, on a guaranteed and viable curriculum, we're talking about establishing a curriculum that has standards that have been agreed upon as the most important standards. We still teach all the standards. Just because we have some that are more important or more powerful than others, so to speak, doesn't mean we don't teach them all. And that's what it means here to say prioritization and not elimination. So we prioritize those top standards. And then in doing so, we use our power as a PLC and our collective efficacy as a PLC to really work through those areas when we're planning, where we realize that the data is showing us that kids aren't getting it, and how can we improve that? All right, so let's look at some examples. The top 10 ways to recognize when your school lacks a guaranteed and viable curriculum. The district handed out ready-made pacing guides, and teachers don't have an opportunity to modify them to meet the needs of their students. So that is a red flag. In the bottom of the slide here, I've put teachers need to feel the ownership of the curriculum. They need to feel like they were a part of it. Number 9, teachers complain that there is not enough time to teach the essential standards. This is a frequent refrain. We hear this a lot. This is a sign that teachers have not collaborated to identify which standards are essential. So again, it's that importance of determining the essential standards. If you do that, there should be enough time to get everything taught. Number 8, teachers say they taught it, but students chose not to learn it, and we've moved on. So this is the idea that teachers are just pacing themselves along. They're like, I have to have this done on Monday, this done on Tuesday, this done on Wednesday, prep for the quiz on Thursday, test on Friday, kind of a thing. And what we really know is that we need to have multiple opportunities to learn, and that means that all students will be mastering the essential standards. We wouldn't move on and start teaching something else unless we've leveraged where we are and we know that multiple opportunities have been given for instruction. Number 7, specialized students who we expect to graduate and lead independent lives have a different set of standards or learning expectations. That is another huge red flag, and that happens a lot. The only time you would modify essential standards would happen for students who are not expected to live independently as adults, especially after graduation. Number 6, data analysis only performed on statewide test scores and not on daily formative assessments that guide instruction. That's another red flag. We don't see that as often, but I do think we see it periodically where there's a lot of emphasis put on statewide tests, and we forget that we need to be having those quick, short formative assessments at the end of every class, at the end of every unit, to really make sure that we're seeing what the kids know and what they don't know so that we can fine-tune and guide our instruction. That idea of the autopsy of the state test scores, it's important, but it doesn't impact daily instruction. Formative assessments should be thought of more as the day-to-day health checkup versus the state test, which is the end of the year autopsy. Nothing we can do about it. It's the end of the year. All right, number 5. Next red flag, there is a data wall or a data war room with charts about state assessments rather than a system to use that data to create goals. You do see this a lot. A lot of places have their data all over the walls, but be careful with that, because what you really want to do is use that state assessment to set your goals, but for your day-to-day work of learning and teaching, you want to rely on formative assessments. Number 4, collaborative teaching teams, PLCs, do something other than examine formative assessment data to inform instructional plans. So in essence, a meeting for any other purpose is PLC Lite. So you don't want to do that. Number 3, teachers believe that data examination exclusively requires test scores. And I put an exclamation point there because that is wrong. That is a big red flag. Formative data can come in all kinds of student artifacts, all sorts of student artifacts. It can be a ticket out the door. It can be raise your hand if you understand this. It can be tell me if you understand this. What are your questions? It could be a quick quiz. It could be a low stakes assessment, but formative data does come in all kinds of student artifacts. Number 2, there is no plan to support teachers as they measure and implement standards. The role of the leader is to support teachers with training, tools, and accountability. So big red flag if you don't have a plan to support teachers as they measure and implement standards. And the number 1 sign that you don't have a guaranteed and viable curriculum, the school doesn't have an agreement among all teachers of the essential content that all students need to know, understand, and be able to do. Now, the district-made curriculum is a good starting point, and I know lots of larger districts do provide a district-made curriculum, but teachers must still agree and commit to ensuring student mastery of these essential standards. And so I'll leave you with this. Robert Marzano says in What Works in Schools that the number 1 factor affecting student achievement is the development of a guaranteed and viable curriculum.